Sam,
Hey, Imran.
thanks for joining me.
Of course, happy to be here.
Would you like to give a quick 10-second, 15-second background on yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how far you want me to go back, but I grew up in Kansas City. So I'm from the Midwest. I went to University of Missouri for college, moved out to San Francisco in 2008, and have largely been in tech sales ever since. So I started as an SDR at a company called EchoSign. I was there for a little over 5 years. I was then VP of sales at Zenefits. I was there for about 2.5 years. Most recently, I was CRO at Brex. I was there for about 4.5 years. And now I'm a partner at Founders Fund, investing in B2B software companies.
Awesome. I'd say there's probably 3 stages of a startup's life when it comes to sales. I'm probably over abstracting it, but one is founder-led sales. That's from $0 to $1 million, let's say. $1 to $2 million, they're at that plateau trying to figure out product market fit and growth. And then the third phase is probably 3 million and up. As a founder that's thinking about this, that's primarily mostly technical, why should founders be selling first?
Well, I think there's 2 reasons that come to mind. I think initially most technology businesses, the initial customer acquisition is founder-led. And that's because from the business's standpoint, the founder has the best probability of closing new customers. And no one understands the product or the vision of the business as well as the founder does. No one understands the target market or the intended audience to sell to as well as the founder does. And so if the founder isn't able to acquire customers and close revenue, there's no way that a salesperson that doesn't understand these things as well as the founder is going to be able to. The other way of thinking about it, so that's sort of like the business perspective, what's best for the business. The founder is going to be better at acquiring customers. The other way of thinking about it is from the salesperson's standpoint, where you really want to enter an environment where there is an existing set of customers that you can pattern match off of. And you can also understand what has resonated and worked well in acquiring those customers. And so you as a sales rep don't come in with this sort of blank canvas without anything to sort of pattern match or go off of. And again, you sort of aren't set up for success from a sales rep standpoint. So I think it is better from both parties' perspectives. If you're the company, you have a better chance of acquiring customers. If you're a sales rep, you have a better chance of acquiring customers if the founder already has done some of that.
But founders are, on like an order of magnitude more introverted, right? Like, they're focused on building a great product and, they're working with their engineering teams. So what advice would you give to founders that are kind of scared to make the first step?
Sure. Well, I think maybe one of the first things is to find comfort that every company that I've ever interacted with, which at this point is hundreds, if not thousands, they all started the same way, including many of the most successful tech businesses that we know of, where founders stepped out of their comfort zone and began interacting with customers and closed the first set of revenue. I think there's a number of things that you can do to make that experience more comfortable and more effective.
You had a very popular tweet where you led a sales kind of talk at Gary Tan's house, and you had this very vibrant tweet thread where I think a lot of the founders in our community read and learn from as well. And one of the things that they'd asked is like, how do you build out your community? And you mentioned something called in-network sales and something that you did at Brex. Could you explain that concept? And, for those that aren't in YC or Alliance, how do you think about building that type of community?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to one of the things that I just mentioned, which is there are a number of things that you as a founder can do to make that experience more comfortable. You talked about stepping outside of your comfort zone and being effectively a salesperson, and also more effective. And so the way that I think about acquiring customers, both your initial set of customers and then beyond, a good analogy would be think about this like concentric circles, where you want to start with the closest concentric circle that you can. And that oftentimes is going to be your personal network. So if you are a founder, we can use Brex as an example. if you're a founder at Brex, you are selling to other startup founders. We were the first corporate card for startups. And so one of the things that you may want to do if you were Pedro and Enrique, you may just want to look at your LinkedIn and do a report on who are my in-network connections that are startup founders at companies between, this size and this size. And so you start reaching out to those people first. As you sort of expand on these concentric circles, you mentioned YC was an advantage that Brex had. And so one of the things that we did was we reached out to the batch that Pedro and Enrique were in, and then we went back to previous batches. And so again, we're sort of expanding on these concentric circles. If you don't have YC, you do have things like the networks of your employees.
Okay.
You do have things like your investor networks, where if you've raised any financing, you can ask for introductions to other portfolio companies or people that the investors may be connected to that would be a good fit for your business. And then you start acquiring customers. And so you have the networks of your customers. Once you've onboarded some customers, you can then ask them for referrals. The thing where I see founders and sales teams maybe at the early stage making mistakes on, I would say the most common approach to outbound or customer acquisition is they will acquire, a CRM, they'll acquire a database of contact information like Zoom info. So you get people's emails, addresses, and phone numbers. And they will acquire a system that does email sequencing like Outreach. And they'll just start dropping people into cold outbound emails. And if we think back to the time where I joined Brex, we had no web presence. We actually didn't have a website. It said coming soon. We hadn't officially launched the product. We were acquiring customers in beta. And so if you were a founder of a company that receives an email from somebody you don't know at a company you've never heard of that doesn't have a website, you're not going to reply to that email. And so that's where this concept of concentric circles is just really effective, because you're not doing these activities that ultimately don't lead to success. And this all goes back to the idea of starting with founder-led sales. That's how we started the conversation. If you are a founder and you are talking to somebody that you know personally because you used to work with them, or they were in your computer science class at Stanford or whatever, that conversation is going to come much more naturally to you than maybe somebody that you got lucky and they replied to one of your cold emails. And so again, it helps sort of solve for some of the resistance that you may have as a founder in acquiring customers.
So let's say I'm a founder. I did my first sales call. What does a founder do then? How do you qualify a customer?
Yeah, I think you do want to qualify the customer. So let's maybe start with that, because it's less obvious. And then how you qualify a customer, you just want to ask. I think at the end of the call, the oftentimes first call, you just say something like, how impactful would this be for your business, or what's your interest level given everything that we've talked about today? And you don't want to sort of fly blind on this, where you're wasting cycles following up with people that would answer those questions as like, low priority or anything like that. You really want to focus on the folks who are like, this is actually super interesting. And then you prioritize those folks. And then one thing that I think I alluded to in the tweet that you referenced, if you're consistently hearing this isn't really a priority for us, and this is the target customer that you have built your product for, that is a sign that you may want to go back to the drawing board a little bit on product market fit. And so your mindset as you enter a lot of these conversations might be customer acquisition. If you're consistently hearing feedback from your target customer, this actually isn't interesting to me, you may want to sort of like go back a step to that product market fit stage. And where I see some founders make a mistake is they actually try and push forward with things like bringing on SDRs or bringing on AEs without the product market fit evidence that you really want prior to reaching that milestone.
You talked about creating a buying process where you outline who the decision makers are and kind of showcasing this to the customer that you're selling to. Why is this important, and why should all founders be doing this?
Yeah. Well, I think two things come to mind. One is from the perspective of the founder. One thing that I heard or hear a lot of is like a hesitancy to ask for money, or just like uncertainty
Yeah.
around how do I approach the process of a sales cycle and acquiring a customer. So one, you're solving for mapping that out from the founder's perspective, like sort of putting pen to paper, like these are the steps that I should follow. And then the other side is the buyer side. And the buyer doesn't know how to buy your product.
Yeah.
It is your job, as whether you're a founder or a salesperson, to educate the buyer
Yeah.
on the best way, the best path forward. Like, how do people get started with using your product? And so you're solving for both of those personas at the same time.
And lastly, how do you manufacture FOMO? You mentioned discounts. I think that's one element, but I think there's a lot more to manufacturing FOMO. So how do you would tell first-time founders to do that?
Yeah. Maybe to take a bit of a step back. I think so much of sales is psychology.
Yeah.
And one way that you can tap into the psychology of sales is this concept of creating FOMO. And it's certainly not one size fits all, but there are different ways that you can do this at different stages of the business. And at a very early stage, one of the things that you might want to do with the folks that say, this is actually a high, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is like a 10 in terms of impact. And so the folks that you sort of qualify into, there is an interest here. One way that you may do that is you say, Brex, we'll use Brex as an example. We're in a beta program. As you see, we don't have a website right now. We're taking on a limited number of customers. We're almost at that limit.
Yeah.
We can get you in. We just need to know if you want in. And if you do, here is the process. Let's get started. And so then there's a bit of a time constraint that drives urgency on the buyer side. And as the business continues to scale, there are other ways that you can accomplish this. At Zenefits, we had a really effective implementation fee that we would waive depending on when the customer would move forward. And so if we're talking, let's just say early December right now, if somebody's to move forward by the end of the year, we'll waive the implementation fee entirely. And that creates a little bit of urgency on the buyer end.
So you're a founder that has hit $1 million in revenue. And I'm going back to kind of your experiences at Brex, which is when you came in roughly, right? When should you hire your first salesperson?
Yeah. So I don't know that it necessarily maps to revenue.
Okay.
The way that I would think about it, everyone should start with founder-led sales.
Okay.
This is, of course, B2B. When you have several, what I will call non-friends and family, revenue-generating customers, that is when you can bring on external sales support. And when you are ready to hire your first salesperson, and by the way, this will map to different amounts of ARR, right? And different number of customers. If you are, I'll call it an enterprise solution where you're selling to much larger businesses, the N of customers is going to be smaller. The amount of revenue is probably going to be higher. If your ACV is 6 figures or something like that, you may be bringing on a sales rep when you have 3 or 4 paying customers and you're $500,000 of ARR. At Brex, we were going after startups. We actually had a few dozen customers before we brought on our first sales rep. And we were generating very little revenue. It was interchange revenue on limited card spend. And so that's why I flag, it doesn't map exactly to ARR or number of customers. Let's just qualify it as a few or a handful of non-friends and family revenue generating customers. Bring in your first salesperson. When you're ready to bring in your first salesperson, bring in 2.
Bring in 2.
Bring in 2. Do not hire just one sales rep.
Why is that?
There's a number of different reasons. But let's just start with the speed with which you learn is basically multiplied by 2. where you have one person that is trying and failing on certain different things that they're testing, and the same is true with another person. They're sharing it with one another. And so the pace with which you are moving to get these people successful is effectively 2x. Because you have two different people trying different, methodologies, different things that they've learned in the past, and then they're sharing it with one another. So you're just moving much faster. The other big reason, well, there are several, if you just make one hire and that person isn't successful, you don't know if you've made a bad hire. You don't know if you have a lack of product market fit. Whereas if you hire two people, there are a few different outcomes. Both can be successful. And that's, of course, like the most desired path. When that's true, I think really strong evidence of product market fit and really strong evidence that you can continue scaling the business. If one is successful and one is not successful, you likely made a bad hire. And so you remove the person that isn't successful, you hire somebody that maybe looks more like the person that is successful. If both are unsuccessful, that's pretty good evidence that you do not have product market fit. And it's maybe like back to the drawing board a little bit on how you can make an external salesperson successful. The likelihood that you made two bad hires is just low, and you get none of those learnings if you just hire one person. And so hire two people instead of one once you have a handful of non-friends and family revenue generating customers. And the next step in this process is once you have two successful salespeople, you then can hire a sales leader to continue scaling the go-to-market organization.
Got it. And when you mentioned in one of your talks where you shouldn't hire a sales leader right away, right? You should hire two sales reps first, and if that goes really well, then you hire a sales lead. Why is that?
Yeah. Again, not one size fits all. There are outlier exceptions to this. But my strong opinion on this for almost every startup is that you hire salespeople before you hire a sales leader. When I joined Brex, the best salespeople that I brought in, and hopefully even the salespeople that were there, they were better sales reps than I was. And it's because I had been a sales leader for a very long time. And so me trying to go back to being a sales rep after a number of years in sales leadership, I actually was hopefully worse at that job than a really good salesperson. So that is one reason. I think another big reason is for most companies, the best sales leaders will not want to join a business that has no other salespeople and only a set of customers that the founder has been able to acquire, because that is elevated risk for a sales leader to join. And so I would argue that the quality of a sales leader that you will be able to hire, if you are hiring them first before you have any successful salespeople in place, is going to be lower than if you follow this sort of happy path of let's get two people in seat successful, let's get to $1 million of ARR, then we bring in a sales rep to continue scaling the go-to-market organization and doing what they are best at, which is leading a team, recruiting and hiring people, and not selling deals individually. That's sort of the philosophy behind it.
Oftentimes we get questions from founders that say, well, should we start spending money on marketing and partnerships? Everybody, that's a common recurring theme. And so what do you tell founders in the pre-seed, maybe seed stage? Should they be focusing on marketing or partnerships, or should they be purely focusing on, product market fit, sales?
Yeah. Let's go back to the concentric circles concept. When you're first getting started, you definitionally have no brand, no marketing in place. You have a founder and some engineers that have built a product, and you want to test this product with, in-network connections that we talked about, where you can sort of more easily get folks on the call to pitch them. You start acquiring some customers. Like you have evidence of product market fit. okay, let's bring in a couple salespeople. We now have, a production website that we can send people to. We have some salespeople. They're starting to do some of the same things that were effective for me as a founder. We're acquiring more customers. We sort of expanded outside of this concentric circle. One of the things that we did at Brex, and one way that I would approach this for, sort of like in the abstract for other startup founders, as these concentric circles continue to expand, you're going to want to leverage some marketing or brand to make your customer acquisition efforts more effective. So I'll give 2 examples that we did at Brex. One was when we launched this product. This was sort of like June of 2018. We wanted to make a really big splash. And the thing that we did was in addition to, some PR around the fundraise, we maybe sponsored some podcasts. The big thing that we did, and this was like a $200,000 to $300,000 expense. We put billboards all over San Francisco. So that's like, squarely in the category of brand marketing. But what it allowed us to do, if you think about, like, again, this concept of concentric circles, literally the day before, so let's call it June 20th, if we launched on June 21st, nobody knew who we were, that we didn't already, specifically target. And then on June 21st, when we launched, we had a bunch of PR around fundraisers, and then we put these billboards up everywhere, and, everybody changed their LinkedIn and posted about it. We specifically then targeted companies and founders that would have been in the area that we were launching these billboards. In the likelihood that a founder that walked by, downtown San Francisco headquarters, that walked by a bunch of our billboards on the way to work or whatever, the likelihood that they would respond to us was significantly higher than somebody, based out of New York, that wouldn't have had that same experience. And so to directly answer your question around marketing and investing in marketing, you want to do that once you have relatively strong evidence of product market fit. And I think the stage that starts to happen is founder has acquired customers, your sales reps have been able to acquire customers, and now you have confidence that you can scale the business. So let's start investing in marketing programs that make our customer acquisition tactics more effective.
One final question. Crypto largely is a slow growing market in terms of like SaaS businesses that are being built around that ecosystem. What do you tell founders that don't have many enterprise customers to sell, but more on the smaller SME side or SMB side?
And is the question, the addressable market for this type of a company is limited compared to
Exactly.
because there aren't that many crypto companies that exist compared to, makes sense. Well, look, I think it is, that makes sense. It's not directly analogous to Brex, but it is in a way. Brex launched as the first corporate card for startups. If you think about the startup market, as a percentage of businesses that exist in the world, in the United States, it is small. It's not as small as crypto, but I'll sort of get to what I would do there. We were really deliberate, and maybe even lucky, but we benefited from, maybe not deliberate, we benefited from 2 things in our early launch timeframe that I think is relevant to the question that you just asked. One is, it was really obvious what we were. We were the first corporate card, okay? So everybody knows what a corporate card is. And so I think that the sort of the clarity in our product offering was one thing that we benefited from. And then the second thing that we benefited from was we were the first corporate card for startups. And so we were very deliberate in the market that we were going after. One thing that is, well, if you know the Brex story, one of the reasons that Brex was so successful with startups is because we had this concept of no personal guarantee, where the incumbent credit cards required the founder to personally guarantee a credit card.
Yes.
So if they didn't pay the bill, it impacted their credit score and they were personally liable for the payments. The other thing that we did was we underwrote based off of the cash balance that the company had in the bank. And so if you're a startup with a couple $1,000,000 in the bank, you got a really high limit. You compare that to what you get with American Express, where the founder only qualifies for a $10,000 credit limit, significantly higher credit limit if we're underwriting based off the cash balance. What is not super well known is that we weren't the first to offer that underwriting model. There was a company called Divvy, and there may have been others, but they were less deliberate about who they were targeting as customers. And so when Brex launched as the first corporate card for startups, when people saw that branding, if you were a startup founder, you immediately sort of became interested in what that offering was, because you identified with this sort of narrow market that was startups. And so I think for companies that are selling into crypto, there are a couple things to remember. One is be really deliberate about what you are and who you are for. And the other thing is, this community, much like startups, is very tight-knit. And so show up where they are. Oftentimes, these are going to be things like conferences. The other thing is, much like startup founders, crypto founders, people that work at crypto companies, they are going to know other people that are in the community. And so really leverage existing relationships that you have to drive brand awareness with potential new customers. And I think that's possible when you're selling to a really narrow market that is less possible when you're everything for everyone.
Sam, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, so nice talking with you.
Likewise.